Pleased to be joined today by Congressman Tony Gonzales. Congressman, thank you for joining us on the Spriester session.
Yeah, thank you for having me, Steve.
I want to talk about the runoff. Obviously coming up, you've been in a runoff before, but never as the incumbent.
Sure.
Is it a different feel for you this time around, and are you surprised you find yourself in a runoff?
Oh, I'm not surprised to find myself in a runoff. Texas 23 is a tough district. It's larger than 30 states, 29 counties, stretches from San Antonio to El Paso, 2/3 of the Texas-Mexico border. You're really representing 4 different types of people. And I'd also say too, runoffs are tough. Runoffs are brutal. I've been joking. Runoff, as long as you're willing to not sleep, not eat, work your guts out, you'll be just fine. And that's exactly what it takes. It's like a block by block. But in a weird way, you get stronger. I know it because I've been in a runoff. I've won a runoff. If you're willing to put the work in, you're willing to listen to people, you're willing to basically say, hey, look, I won every county the first time. I got nearly 50%, but I didn't get 50%, and kind of be humble about it and go, what do I have to do to earn your vote? Maybe have these discussions and be realistic about it. You can get a lot stronger out of it.
What have you learned? What are you changing between, the first time and now this runoff?
Yeah, some of it is people are mad, Steve. People are mad, and they're mad for a reason. They're mad because inflation's through the roof. They can't afford to buy a house. They can't sell a house. The border crisis is very real. They're just really angry, right? And so they're looking for someone to tap into that. I get it. The other piece too is I got to do a better job of highlighting some of the wins that we've done, real things that help people, not just the politics stuff. All that stuff kind of goes back and forth, but some real things. I'll give you an example. Last year we had 42 police officers here in San Antonio that were shot at in the line of duty. This was a historic number. And one of the things I did is I sat down with police officers, those half dozen police officers that were shot in the line of duty, and I asked them, hey, if there was one thing I can do, what would that be? And they asked me for bulletproof vehicles that had bulletproof windows and bulletproof doors. So guess what? We're working with the police department, we're working with the San Antonio Police Officers Association, and we're getting them that. We delivered a Child Development Center in Lackland Air Force Base, so important to Military City, USA. We've delivered some just roads and infrastructure, but the big piece is just showing up and delivering in good times and bad, and I need to do a better job of highlighting some of the wins.
You said people are angry. People are angry out there at a lot of different things. Do you think that's why you're caught up in it? It's kind of a, throw the incumbents out kind of movement?
Part of that is that, but the other part of it too is I've only been in politics 3 years. I retired from the military after 20 years, and I jumped right in, and I go right into Congress in the toughest district, and then all these things happen, and there I'm at the center of this border crisis, the center at the worst school shooting in Texas history. And so a lot of times what I've learned is, as a member of Congress, you don't get to make a lot of choices. The votes that come before you sometimes are bad and worse. And so either way, you're kind of put in this spot. So a lot of times it's about explaining what happened, and also what I've learned, listening. I need to do a little bit more listening on the front end. And my job is, while I may have my opinions or my take on things, my job is to always represent my district. What does my district want? What is in the best interest of my district? So those are a couple of things.
You were censured by the Texas Republican Party. You've been targeted mainly, I would say, over the vote in gun control in Uvalde. Would you change anything that you've done in the first, 2 years of your tenure?
I would change maybe how I approach some things. I wouldn't change my voting record. I'm very proud of my voting record. One of the things that, I'm a retired Navy Master Chief. I spent 20 years in the military, 5 years in Iraq and Afghanistan. I have 6 children. My oldest graduated from UTSA. A lot of things are very personal to me in this district. I grew up in Camp Wood, which is 35 minutes away from Uvalde. So a lot of things are just very personal. So when that vote took place, it was all about how do we protect other families from ever having to go down this horror? At the same time, how do we protect those that are legally trying to purchase firearms? And so, I worked really hard on that piece of legislation. It really was a mental health piece of legislation. But one of the things that I've done is, since that legislation's been passed, how do you bring those dollars home? Because it's not real until we have those mental health counselors in our schools, till we have those school resource officers. We've worked really closely with DOJ to do just that.
Yeah, were you disappointed on election night that you didn't win it outright? Because like you said, you were close. And I know that you didn't come out and talk to the media afterwards. I mean, was that a disappointment or was it something else?
No, you're always disappointed. I mean, it was twofold. One is you're excited to get the most amount of votes, excited to win all 29 counties, excited to do well throughout, but you were just, I mean, who the hell wants to be in a runoff, right? But once again, if you're willing to roll up your sleeves, go to work, be humble about it, you can get a whole lot stronger out of the deal. I think back to that first race. You know, I had this runoff in the primary, and then I was going against this essentially anointed person that was supposed to win, but because of that grit and grind that I had to go through that first primary, I was able to win overwhelmingly. So I look at it the same way. It's like, this is God going, hey, look, you've done some things well, but you need to be a little bit more humble about things and listen to more folks, and I think everything will go over well.
I think I misspoke when I said your first term. I mean, this is you're going through your second term here. When it comes to your opponent, this is a guy that I would call a non-traditional candidate. What is the biggest difference between you and him? I mean, now that you know who you're taking on in the runoff, have you sharpened your criticism when it comes to Brandon Herrera?
Brandon Herrera is not from here. Brandon Herrera thinks Trump can't win the election. Brandon Herrera makes fun of Greg Abbott being in a wheelchair. Brandon Herrera makes fun of veterans. Brandon Herrera is 28 years old, and the only job he's ever had is a YouTuber. When I was 28 years old, I'd already been in the military 10 years. I'd already served in Iraq and Afghanistan 5 years. I already had 2 kids, and I was living my life. So age, is part of it. He just has no experience. He thinks being a comedian he's auditioning to be a comedian for Texas 23. That's not what our district needs nor wants. Our district needs to have a representative that shows up in good times and bad. And when you're making these decisions, to listen to the people and ultimately deliver.
The Second Amendment has been his big stance that he has gone through, not only as a candidate, but even before then. How do you delineate yourself from him? What is the biggest difference between you and Brandon Herrera?
You look at my voting record, my voting record is very strong on the Constitution. Once again, I swore an oath to the Constitution at 18 years old, and I've never stopped doing that, right? And I've worked really hard to go, look, we can protect the Constitution and we can protect our kids. It does not have to be either or. And anyone trying to sell you that it does is lying to you, because that's where the politics come into place. When somebody's spinning this, that, or the other. The facts are this: I have voted against an assault weapons ban, right? Very conservative stance. I've taken a lot of flack from my left flank, if you will, for that. I voted against raising the age limit from 18 to 21. Once again, very conservative stance. I voted against universal background checks. A lot of these different positions, I've taken those votes. I'm not talking about it. I've taken those votes. I've stood up there and do those things, and I will continue to do that. But I also believe, once again, our kids deserve to feel safe in their school. They shouldn't be murdered when they're eating breakfast. And we can fix this. But it's going to take a lot of time, energy, effort, and political capital.
And it's going to take a bipartisan effort, correct?
Yeah, I mean, this is when a crazy mad person comes into a school to kill kids. You think he cares if they're Republicans or Democrats or what color skin they are, or who they pray to? No, crazy people do crazy things. To me, this is an area that should unite us. But once again, I mean, how do we protect the Constitution, which I think is fundamental to what the Founding Fathers believed in, but also how do we also protect our kids? I think we can accomplish both, but it is going to take a lot of people just coming together and solving problems.
Is bipartisanship a bad word?
I don't think so. I'll work with anybody. I'll work with anybody who wants to solve a problem. And I've proven that at the local level. Terry Castillo, a city councilwoman, we worked together on some housing issues. On the federal level, Henry Cuellar is a very good friend of mine, and we've worked together on solving some national issues on that. Joaquin Castro, Chip Roy, I will work with anyone. I don't care what your politics are, if you truly believe in serving the people.
Is it hard taking on a candidate who maybe doesn't have defined positions on certain things? When it comes, he's been very outspoken about gun control, not so outspoken about the border, not so outspoken about, immigration, some of the things that, you have already made record votes on. I mean, like you said, this is a guy who has made mainly his fame through YouTube. I mean, non-traditional. It's a different campaign than really, not just you, a lot of candidates have had to face.
I have always taken, in life in general, but in this race it is no different, I've always ran against myself. I'm not running against somebody else. I'm running against myself. And how do I get better? How do I get stronger? Nobody knew where Eagle Pass was 3 years ago. And now all of a sudden everyone's talking about Eagle Pass as if they're the border security expert. Why? Because I've hosted over 200 members of Congress. I've hosted Elon Musk, the richest man on earth. We've advocated for these positions. So I've worked really hard on the border in particular. Where was Brandon Herrera when, on December 20th, when there was 10,000 Venezuelans under a bridge in Eagle Pass? Where was Brandon Herrera when Del Rio, there were thousands of Haitians under a bridge, no end in sight? It's easy to sit in the cheap seats and throw rocks from afar, but this district has always been about showing up in good times and bad, and ultimately delivering.
Let's talk about your district. You've got to know it probably as well as anybody. The interests of Eagle Pass aren't necessarily even the same interests of San Antonio. Sometimes Eagle Pass interests are way different than Del Rio. Then you throw in El Paso, you throw in Alpine, Marfa. I mean, have you come to the realization you're just not going to make everybody happy?
Oh, 1,000. I learned a long time ago in life, you can never please anyone, you can never please everyone, and nor should you try. Be firm in your values, be who you are, be upfront with everyone, and be genuine. Do the best you possibly can. You're going to make mistakes. I've made mistakes. I'll make more mistakes. It's how do you learn, and ultimately, how do you listen? I was raised by my grandparents growing up, and they taught me, listen, Tony. You walk into a room, you listen to what people have to say. I'll give you an example. This is a prime example of the differences in my district. I just did a swing out in West Texas, out in Fort Stockton and Monahans and Crane, Upton County, all by Midland area there. Their number one issue is oil theft. People are coming over and they're stealing oil. Oil and gas is their number one industry out there, and that's their issue. You think that's the issue here in San Antonio? It's completely different, right? Or El Paso or the border. So in many cases, this district is very challenging, but it's also a whole lot of fun. I mean, you get to learn so much. Out in West Texas, the Jeff Davis Mountains, just the most beautiful parts I've ever been to.
That's what I was saying. Just the geography is so different, let alone the different interests of the different communities.
Sure.
Final question for you. A Republican stepping into the booth on election day, they see the name Herrera, they see the name Gonzales. Why should they pick you?
It's pretty simple. People should vote for me on May 20th. That's when early vote starts for the runoff. May 28th is election day. I would appreciate your vote because I've shown up in good times and bad. I live here. I'm raising my children here. I am vested. I grew up here. I grew up in this district, and it's my job to deliver for us. We have enough comedians in Congress. We don't need any more clowns. We need serious legislators that maybe don't always get it right, but they're always willing to put their fight, and they're always willing to get into the fight and ultimately deliver.
Worried about what could happen on the 28th?
No, you don't worry. I mean, the way I've taken it is this. As long as I do my job, good things will happen. And if you've noticed, I haven't really been campaigning. I'm not doing these rallies, and it's just going to work. If you look at our social media, Tony Gonzales for Texas, Congress Tony Gonzales. If you look at our social media, I'm just meeting with constituents. I'm meeting with elected officials, and we're just going to work delivering real issues for real people in a real way. And I think as long as I do that, good things will happen.
That's all the questions I have. Congressman, thank you for your time.
Thanks, Steve.
Appreciate it, bro.
Yeah, man.
Yeah.